The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile has just put Formula One teams in big trouble, and it all comes down to one number. 200 kilometers per hour. That is where the electric power now starts fading in Monaco. The override button still exists, but its advantage disappears. Active aerodynamics are banned. And suddenly, the 2026 cars are not being unleashed through Monte Carlo. They are being restrained. That should scare every team on the grid. Because if Formula One's newest technology needs special limits before it can survive the sport's most famous street circuit, then this is not just an engine rule change. This is the first real warning that the new era may have gone too far. Mercedes has the most to lose, because part of the W17's dominance comes from the very systems now being restricted. Ferrari has the most to gain, because Monaco rewards balance, grip, confidence, and one perfect lap between the walls. McLaren and Red Bull see the field closing. And now the question before Monaco is brutal. Did the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile protect the drivers, or did it accidentally expose the first weakness in Mercedes' entire season? Subscribe to the channel. At first, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile could make this sound like a simple Monaco safety decision. And on the surface, it is. Monaco is the one place on the calendar where danger never needs to be exaggerated. The walls are already close. The corners are already narrow. The tunnel already feels like a launch point into a braking zone with almost no mercy. Every driver knows Monaco is different. Every engineer knows Monaco is different. Every team principal knows that one tiny mistake in Monte Carlo can destroy an entire weekend before strategy even matters. So when the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile looked at the 2026 cars and decided the normal engine behavior could not be left untouched, the official explanation was easy to understand. Safety. But Formula One is never that simple. Because when a safety decision changes the way the cars deliver power, it also changes the way the race is fought. And that is where the trouble begins. The key change is the special Monaco engine mapping, Rev 1. It sounds like a technical label, the kind of thing that would normally disappear inside an engineering briefing. But this time, it changes the entire meaning of the weekend. Under the usual configuration, the electric power from the MGUK can keep helping the car until much higher speeds. The driver feels that electric force pushing the car forward, giving it acceleration, giving it response, helping it turn energy into lap time. But in Monaco, that full push begins fading much earlier. At 200 kilometers per hour. That number is the alarm bell. Because for normal road cars, 200 kilometers per hour sounds extreme. But for a Formula One car, it is not the end of acceleration. It is still part of the attack. The car is still building speed, still pulling, still using the electric system as one of its most important weapons. And now, in Monte Carlo, that weapon is being controlled. Not because the cars cannot go faster. Because the circuit may not safely allow them to. That is the hidden problem the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile has exposed. The new cars are not simply powerful. They are powerful in ways that create danger in very specific parts of the lap. The tunnel exit is the clearest example. A car arrives from darkness into light, already carrying huge speed, with the wall waiting close and the braking zone arriving immediately. There is no wide escape road. No generous runoff. No space to get it wrong and laugh about it later. Then there is the climb toward Casino Square, where the car rises through a blind, narrow section and the driver needs absolute trust. If the power arrives too aggressively, if the speed builds too quickly, if the rear of the car gives even the smallest warning sign, Monaco does not give the driver much time to negotiate. This is why the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile acted. But this is also why the teams are tense. Because Rev 1 does not affect every car in the same emotional way. Mercedes has been the reference point of the season. The W17 has looked dominant because its systems work together. Power delivery, electric deployment, efficiency, balance, tire behavior, driver confidence. It is not one advantage. It is several advantages stacked on top of each other until the rest of the grid struggles to respond. Now one of those layers has been cut back. Mercedes is not suddenly weak. But it may be less untouchable. And in Formula One, that is enough to change the mood of an entire paddock. Ferrari does not need Mercedes to collapse. Ferrari only needs Mercedes to come back toward the fight. McLaren does not need the fastest car. McLaren only needs the field to compress. Red Bull does not need perfection. Red Bull only needs a race where the normal order becomes fragile. That is what Monaco can become under these rules. A compression point. A place where the fastest car may still be fast, but not fast enough to escape every weakness. That is why Ferrari sees opportunity. Monaco has never been a pure power circuit. It does not reward the car with the strongest straight line advantage in the way other tracks do. It rewards grip, rotation, traction, courage, and the driver's ability to put the car exactly where it needs to be, lap after lap, with the walls almost touching the mirrors. With the electric deployment restricted earlier, the race moves even further toward those qualities. Less value for raw power. More value for balance. Less value for maximum acceleration. More value for confidence. That is why this engine rule change could become the first real chance for Ferrari to attack Mercedes on equal emotional ground. Because if Ferrari gets the car into the right window, if the front end bites, if the rear tires stay calm, if Leclerc or Hamilton can commit fully to the barriers, then Mercedes may not be able to rely on the same advantage that has protected it elsewhere. That is the first major shift. The second is even more symbolic. The override button. In the 2026 rules, the override button is supposed to give drivers a way to access maximum electric deployment in key moments. A tool to attack. A tool to defend. A tool to turn energy into opportunity when the fight demands it. But in Monaco, the button's advantage disappears. It still exists physically. The driver can still press it. But the special Rev 1 mapping means the power fades from the same 200 km/h point anyway. In other words, the button is there, but the magic is gone. That detail matters because it tells every driver something uncomfortable. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile is not just adjusting the race. It is neutralizing a driver tool in the name of safety. And once that happens, teams immediately start asking what else can be neutralized when the next circuit creates a different risk. That is the bigger fear. Monaco may not be the end of this. It may be the beginning. Because Singapore is expected to sit in a similar restrictive category. Other street circuits may raise their own safety questions. High-speed tracks have different concerns, especially around sudden electric power drop-off at extreme speeds. This means the 2026 era may become a championship where the car's character changes more dramatically from circuit to circuit. Not just wing level. Not just tire compounds. Not just brake cooling. The actual way the power is delivered. That is a huge problem for teams, because Formula One is built on predictability. Engineers want to know how the car behaves. Drivers want to know how the throttle feels. Strategists want to know where the strengths are. Simulators need stable assumptions. Every department builds its plan around expected behavior. When the governing body changes that behavior by circuit, the target moves. And when the target moves, confidence becomes harder to build. At Monaco, confidence is everything. A driver does not have time to think through every corner. He feels the car. He trusts the car. He knows how the rear will respond when he feeds in throttle. He knows how much grip he has when the front brushes toward the apex. He knows whether he can take one more inch of curb, or whether that inch becomes a wall. Change the power delivery, even slightly, and the driver must rebuild that trust. Not from zero, but enough to matter. And at Monaco, enough to matter can mean the difference between pole position and starting behind a rival you cannot pass. That is where the engine rule change becomes more than a safety adjustment. It becomes a qualifying weapon. Or a qualifying threat. If Mercedes adapts immediately, the rest of the grid may be terrified, because it would mean the W17 is not only powerful, but flexible. It can lose part of its normal advantage and still stay ahead. But if Mercedes struggles to find the same rhythm, Ferrari will sense it instantly. One hesitation from Mercedes. One perfect Ferrari lap. One front row position. That could change the entire race. Because Monaco is not a place where Sunday easily fixes Saturday. If you start behind, you may stay behind. If you lose track position, the faster car can become trapped. If the driver in front has clean air and confidence, the car behind can be helpless even with more pace. That is why the third layer matters. Active aerodynamics are banned for the whole Monaco weekend. Completely. No active aero in qualifying. No active aero in the race. No straight mode. No aerodynamic opening even on the short main straight. The system that was supposed to define the 2026 era has been switched off at the most famous race in Formula One. That is not a small message. The new cars were designed around the idea of adaptability. Less drag when speed matters. More downforce when grip matters. A car that can change its aerodynamic state depending on what the lap demands. But Monaco has forced the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile to say, not here. Here, the wings stay fixed. Here, the car stays in a safer high downforce configuration. Here, the clever system takes a back seat to the walls. Again, the reason is safety. But the consequence is competitive. Mercedes loses another part of its complete package. Ferrari gains another reason to believe the weekend has shifted toward chassis balance and driver confidence. McLaren and Red Bull see the same thing everyone sees. The strongest car has had some of its sharpest tools dulled. Not removed from the sport forever. but dulled here. And here is Monaco. A circuit where one small change can decide everything. This is why the paddock feels shaken. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile is not simply saying, be careful. It is saying, the cars must behave differently. That changes the meaning of the event. And it raises an uncomfortable question about the new era. If the flagship technologies of 2026 need to be restricted at Monaco, did the sport design cars for a calendar that no longer fully fits them? That question is dangerous because Monaco is not just another venue. Monaco is identity. It is Formula One showing the world that speed is not only about open roads and long straights. It is about precision under pressure. It is about brushing the barrier. It is about making a car dance through a city where every mistake is public and immediate. If the future cars need special limits to survive that identity, then the sport has to decide what it values more. Unrestricted technology. Or historic circuits. That is not an easy choice. And the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile is trying to avoid making it by doing something more complicated. Keeping the circuit, keeping the cars, but controlling the risk. That may be the right answer. But it is not a clean answer. Because the moment you control the risk through performance restrictions, you change the competition. That is the truth every team understands. Mercedes can say it accepts safety. Ferrari can say it welcomes a fair fight. McLaren can say it is focused on execution. Red Bull can say it will adapt. But behind every public answer is the real question. Who gains? Who loses? And who gets exposed? Right now, Mercedes has the most to lose because it arrived with the biggest advantage. Ferrari has the most to gain because Monaco rewards the exact areas that become more important when power and active aero are reduced. McLaren and Red Bull gain hope because the field may compress. And the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile gains pressure because its decision will be judged not only by safety, but by the race it creates. If Monaco becomes safer and competitive, the governing body will look decisive. If Monaco becomes processional, controversial, or politically charged, the same decision will become a target. That is why the removal of the special mandatory pit stop rule also matters. The previous Monaco experiment tried to force more strategy by requiring extra stops. The goal was to create movement at a circuit where overtaking is incredibly difficult. But the impact was limited. More pit lane action did not automatically create more real racing. So now, teams have freedom again. 1 stop. 2 stops. Possibly something unusual if conditions allow. On the surface, that is fair. But in this Monaco, with restricted deployment and no active aero, it may make track position even more powerful. If the tools for overtaking are reduced, and the strategy is not artificially forcing extra movement, then whoever starts ahead may hold the race in their hands. That means qualifying is everything. And qualifying under a changed power map, with fixed aero, and a compressed field, is exactly where a surprise can happen. That is the opening Ferrari wants. A perfect lap from Leclerc. A controlled, experienced performance from Hamilton. A car that feels better over the bumps. A Mercedes that cannot quite extract its usual margin. That is the recipe for a shock. But Ferrari cannot simply assume the opportunity will become victory. Monaco punishes expectation. A blocked lap can ruin everything. A tire warm-up problem can destroy confidence. A small lockup can break the rhythm. A strategy call made 1 lap too late can bury a race behind traffic. This is why the situation is so tense for all teams. The rule changes create opportunity, but they also create fragility. Nobody knows exactly how the weekend will settle until the cars run seriously. The simulations can warn. The rules can control. The engineers can model. But the drivers still have to feel the car in the streets. That is where the truth will appear. When the electric push fades earlier, does the car feel calmer or less alive? When active aero is gone, does the balance feel predictable or heavy? When the override button loses its advantage, do drivers feel they have fewer tools to attack? When track position becomes even more powerful, do teams become cautious or aggressive? Those answers will shape the race. And maybe the championship. Because the psychological effect could be enormous. If Mercedes remains dominant, the rest of the grid will understand something painful. Even when the rules reduce some of its advantage, the W17 still has enough. That would make Mercedes look deeper, stronger, and more complete than before. But if Ferrari beats Mercedes, the entire paddock will take a different lesson. Mercedes can be reached. Mercedes can be restricted into vulnerability. Mercedes can be beaten when the circuit and the rules push the race toward balance, grip, and confidence rather than pure deployment strength.